Hi, welcome to another Canto Roboflow training movie. In this training movie, I will give some extra information and demo about working with dates in email, or in other words, how can I send email and add information to that email that comes from the workflow. A hot folder workflow, a hot collection workflow, those two types of workflows have automatic email built into the workflow, which means that the email notification field, if you populate it with an email address or several email addresses separated by semicolons, it knows that it has to create a bundled mail. What is a bundled mail? A bundled mail means that for the number of files it will process in this particular workflow, it will send an email to the user. It will send an email report to the user configured here, or multiple users configured here. So by default, if you execute this workflow, it will use this information to build the email. You have a subject, which is just one subject. You have the body of the mail, which is just one fixed body, and then you can add information to the mail, and for each file that is being executed, it will store this information, and it will concatenate with previous files. So if you're saying that you want the file name of the hot record, the current file being processed, then for each file being processed, it will create this. Why are we using here HTML? Because you can lay out your mail using HTML. You can use plain text as well, but it is much easier to lay out your email. So you can use bold tags and all kinds of nice stuff. You can go even as far as adding images just by specifying the real complete image source string. But that's not in this scope of the training movie. The basic idea is, what if you want to know how long it took for each file to process? Well, then you can do the following. You can say, I want to store, for my mail, I want to store what date it started and what date it ends. Well, the workflow, when it starts, you can store this in two ways. You can either decide to put it here, store the start date here in an internal variable. That means it will be for the initial start of the workflow. If you run this workflow on demand, it will be each time it is run. But if you run this in an interval, it will just store it once at the start. So maybe you don't want that. Another alternative is here in the workflow to add a conditional saying, give me the workflow progress. And this seems to me like the most smart way to deal with this. You can say workflow progress first loop, first item of loop, sorry. And then I can say, okay, test if first item of loop. And by adding this first item of loop, and I want it on the first line, so let's do copy paste here, like that. And then in here, I can say new, and I can say I want to store a date. I want to store a date as text. Now, depending on what version you're working with, be careful, because there was a bug in this action. It was not storing the date correctly. So for the purpose of being safe, I'm just going to use store text and use inline scripting to get to the variable I want to store. So here is date time format. So you can use this to specify what date time you want, what time you want to store, and it goes all the way to milliseconds if you want, or including seconds, minutes, hours. You can fix this to whatever you like. So then I call this before first. So this way, this will store this in before first. Be very, very careful. If I store this as before first here, anything you store in a script only exists inside the execution of that script at that moment of time for that particular file being processed. If you want to keep memory variables in memory that persist across all processing, then you need to store them at global. That means it will be stored at the same level as the parameters, and will be available for the complete execution time of the workflow. I'm going to store this piece and I will show you why. So this is before first. I can say copy and paste. Again, some older versions might not immediately show the triangle, in which case you first need to save this. And then I go back here and I say now it's not before first item, but now I want last item. So after the last item, I'm also going to store something. So test last item of loop. And then I'm going to store that same date time, and I'm going to call it after last. So you see, here is last item, and after the last item, I'm storing after last. I'm also, to be able to show you the additional information, I'm also going to store it here. I'm going to say store tag, and I'm going to call it at start. Like this, and we're going to put in this like that, and I'm going to say store tag hash like this. So now I'm going to store that same date time, and I called it at start. Now in here I can say edit, and I can say that not pressing enter just like that. You have to shift enter it to be able to do character returns. I can say here workflow started, and then you can add here tag tag. And maybe a little thing here, you might wonder why I did not prefix here at start with the hash global hash parameter. Well, that is because at this point when this is executed, there are only global parameters, and so it's not yet processing individual, so the only place it can store it is the global. But if you want to make it consistent, you could prefix it with global and it would work just as well. So what I'm going to say here is I'm going to add here at first, and then I'm going to say oh boy, too many enters. Then I'm going to say let's like that, and then I say first item before first item, and I can say add tag open close tag and close, and it was called. Again, I could leave away the global because at this point the local information doesn't exist anymore. This is executed after everything has been processed, so there is only the global, but doesn't matter. Just to keep it clear, I can say before first, which was the name of the variable that I gave it. And before I lose this, I'm also gonna prefix this so I can see the date on each individual item, how long it took, if you like. It's not mandatory, of course, but now I can easily say copy paste of this. So here, let's do this, and then at the end I can say here. So as I said, this tag is actually nothing else than the concatenation of this. So if 20 records were executed, this is executed, stored 20 times, concatenated into a variable called email message. And so that's how you can influence that. If you have this, if you remove this tag, you will not have the detailed information of each record. And then I can say after last item. So here I can say after last. So let's run the workflow. In this case, it doesn't really matter what this workflow does, but this is a workflow that creates fields in your catalog. So show log. There is apparently an error in my workflow, but that doesn't matter. That's not what I'm concerned about here. I wanted to receive my email, and you will always see in your logging if an email was sent, because it will always say it. It will say there is an email sent to. So if I go and check my mail, you see that I got an email. The subject, I forgot to make it, but what you see is invalid tag. So at first, I think I miss at start, and so that was a mistake. Then before first, you see that's the date time stamp, and then after last, and then the individual date it added to the file it just processed. So below you find the new documents, blah de blah, and you can see that automatically it is giving you before and after, and fixing this one. Let's go back here. Let's go into the workflow. So as I said, it's called here at start and not at first. So I'm going to say report on start stop, but it's this that I want to change. I'm going to call this at start, and if I save, okay. So if I run the workflow again, start, and if I go to my mail, I see that I have a new one, and now it nicely says workflow started at before first item. So you see there's a little bit of difference in time, but depending on the workflow, if this is a watch folder and it has to do the whole inventory thing and comparing thing before, could be that at start is now, and the actual processing final files found, etc., could be half an hour or an hour later. So that's how you can do that, and then you can get individual information about these things. So that's how this can work. Be very careful. As I said, a hot collection workflow has this, and a hot folder workflow has this. But for instance, if you look at watch categories, this has this, but a watch folder workflow does not have this. So if you want to still receive an email on the start and stop of this workflow, then you need to use another trick to make that happen. So in that case, you might want to try to use send mail by going to a next workflow. And so you can have this hot folder workflow, for instance, doing nothing else than just start and look in a folder that does nothing, but being called from a watch folder as a next flow, and then adding using the email that is configured in there to send you the email saying I stopped then. So that could be a little bit more tricky if you want to use that on a watch folder workflow. You can, however, create in a watch folder workflow, for instance, log file in which you store your information, store your logging information, and then mail that to the user. You could go as far as just mail you the log file. So Roboflow is able to send mail and attach a file. So if you want, you could attach your log file to your mail, and there is an inline scripting tag that allows you to do that. So if you go to workflow templates and maybe it's in the hot folder defined additional parameters. No, it's not email configuration. Maybe in here. Here it is. So if you add this to the body of your mail, and here would be then the path to your file, and in here you could use the application folder / and then the name of your log, which is the log folder / and then the logs folder, the name of your log file, which is always the same. It's the name of the workflow extended with the date of today. Then you could just as well mail you the log file. And so there are possibilities in workarounds if mail is not a standard feature of the type of workflow. So I hope this was helpful, figuring out how to send email and keep track of how long a certain workflow was running. Thank you for joining this training movie, and see you in the next one.